Hey, we are back at Mimi's Corner with another episode. Last week we spoke to Shateek and she shared her side of my father has another family. So today we're going to sit down with Arielle and she's going to share her side of her upbringing, her relationship status with her family and her siblings. And I'm so excited to have you here today.
Yes,
Arielle, thank you for coming and sharing your story. Arielle, whew, where are you from?
I'm from the Bronx.
Oh, she's from the BX.
I am.
Okay, we're in the Bronx.
Soundview.
Okay.
I'm born and raised there. Well, I was born in Harlem. Was raised in the Bronx my whole life. What else about me?
Yeah, tell them about you.
I went to Catholic school my whole life, literally from kindergarten to I graduated high school.
What school did you go to?
St. Barnabas. It was in.
I went to Aquinas.
Did you really?
Yes. Barnabas
Okay.
is by 238. So I know a couple of people that went to Barnabas, but Aquinas.
My cousin, she went to Aquinas.
Okay.
Okay.
So shout out to the all girl schools.
Yep.
Yeah. And what are you doing now?
I got my license and certification in mental health and school counseling. I'm working in that field somewhat all around the place. So,
okay.
But yeah.
So she is a beautiful, Black, intelligent, certified in mental health. And I think that's awesome because we don't have people that look like us in those settings. And I know a lot of people aren't excited about sharing those stories with people. Like, I don't want to talk about that. No, thank you. I want nobody in my business. That's the first thing that people go to. Like, I don't want nobody in my business. So, last week I sat down with your sister and she shared her side of the story. She is a firecracker.
Yeah.
And I know that she's somebody that just tells it like it is. She doesn't hold back. And when I asked her, of course, when we were at brunch, and I was like, you know what? Would you sit down? And she's like, yeah. And then I asked you, like, are you gonna? You're like, yes. So I really want to thank them for being open enough and willing to share, because this is such a touchy subject.
Yeah.
And so let's jump right in. So I want to know, how long were your parents together?
To be honest, I don't know. I just know from like what I've heard, it was a long time. It was years before me, and then there were years after me. And that's all I could say, because timeline-wise, I do not know.
So your parents were together mostly all your life?
Yeah. Well, my early life. My early life. Yeah. After I turned about maybe 10, I kind of, me myself started to like go kind of the opposite way, just because of the way that I started to see. So for me, it's like everybody's perspective of the story is different. So as I got older and I started to see the story differently, it was like, okay, something isn't right here. So yeah, like timeline wise, I think till I was about 10. I remember he was like in my life.
He was in your life. So when Shateek and I sat down, she said that her dad lived with you and her dad lived with her. So your dad lived with you. So what was that like? Was he living with you helping you get ready for school and those type of things?
So no, like it's funny because, like, again, growing up, I didn't know this was a problem. So I didn't know anything differently. He would come home from work, and either he would pick me up or my mom would pick me up from my grandmother's house, because they like watched me in the afternoons until they got off for work. And we would go home and, like do dinner, do all of those things and go to sleep. And when I woke up, he was never there, but he went to work. So again, like half my life, I'm like, yeah, like I don't understand what's wrong, what's going on. Like I was so confused, because that's the only life that I knew, and I thought it was right. I didn't know that there were other things that I didn't know. So
there were so many different things that factored into the actual relationship that your parents had and the family dynamics. It's like, well, he was here before I went to bed. So if he had to go to work, he had to go to work. You're not thinking like he had to go be with his other family.
Not even close to thinking that.
So, what was your relationship like with your father?
I feel like at first, from what I remember, like younger, like it was good. It was cool. It was, you know, I don't know.
Did he go to your like parent teacher conference?
Not parent teacher conferences, but he went to shows. He went to like little things. He was there. I can definitely say that. But yeah, like I don't really know how to explain it because he was there and it was like, oh, it was cool. And then for me, what the switch was, truthfully, things started to become about my mom. And when it started to become about my mom, it's kind of like, okay, so it's not about me anymore. It's about my mom. And that's when I kind of took a step back and was like, okay, like, never mind. I don't like the way that this feels. And I think a lot of the situations that's happened that made me see what was going on that was wrong was because every time I was around, I didn't like the way I felt. So, yeah.
So, I guess this is a turning point in your parents' relationship where things were getting rocky with them. So this is where you're like, what is going on?
I can't even say that I didn't know. I just thought it was like they were fine. I didn't, like he came, he was there. I never like heard arguing or anything. I don't know what that's like to experience. I don't know.
So, how many siblings do you have on your mother's side, father's side?
I'm my mom's only child.
So I
have 3 other sisters.
Okay, so your other sisters are from your dad's side.
Yes.
What was it like to know? Because if you're an only child, like my daughter, she's an only child. What was it like to know that you had siblings? And when did you find out that you had siblings?
I always knew I had siblings. Like I always knew that. I remember the first time I met one of my siblings. It wasn't Shateek. It was my other sister, and it was one day that my father was like, "Oh, I'm gonna bring your nieces and your nephew and your sister to come see you." So I'm like, "Okay." I'm excited. I'm like, "Okay." I'm jumping up and down. Like I'm gonna meet one of my sisters and my nieces and nephews. In my mom's household, it was just me. I had cousins and they were siblings, but it was literally just me. I was always the outsider. So now to be like, oh, I'm meeting my sister and my nieces and you get what I'm saying? Like I'm trying to brag about it. And like, I feel like my other family is just kind of like, oh, okay. And I never caught on. I'm like, I'm 7.
When you say your other family, you mean my like mom. Your mom's side?
Yeah, I feel like my cousins and them just be like, and I'm just sitting here like, not knowing that, yeah, girl, you look crazy. Like, you the bastard child. It's all right. We could say it. Like, but again, me being 6, 7, I don't know that. So I remember when they came over, and I'm sure Shateek told this story because I will never forget this day. But my perspective of this day is so different. I remember them getting out the car and like everybody was just looking at me like.
And this is at the age of 7?
I want to say I was about 6 or 7, yeah.
Okay.
And they're just looking at me like. And I'm like, I'm not happy.
You were smiling and excited.
Like, I'm confused. My sister had said something that wasn't so nice. And right then and there, it was just kind of like, oh, okay. Okay, cool. I see what's going on here. So then my father was like, talk, this is your nephew. Now I have a nephew. Now, mind you, I'm already little. So when I was little, I was even littler than what I was supposed to look like.
Because she is tiny, y'all.
So
she's really tiny.
I'm thinking that these little babies are going to get out the car that I get to pick up. And these people are like bigger than me. So what do you mean my niece and my nephew? Like, I don't know. Like, they look like me. can somebody explain? I'm not understanding. And my father was like, talk, you guys talk or whatever. So I'm like, are you guys supposed to call me auntie? Because in my other house, right, like my aunt, like she's older, and like they said you're older. Like I had so many questions, and I feel like for them was like, what? And I'm like, huh? Like, are we not all here? And I do think that my sister has said something like, oh no, well, they don't need to call you that or something like that. And I was just kind of like, okay, but I don't.
Was it the same sister that you met?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I'm like, I'm confused. I don't know what's going on.
So the sibling that said that, it wasn't Shateek.
It wasn't Shateek. It was my other sister, which is Shateek's other sister from her mom too.
Okay, so that's your dad's daughter as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So when you saying at 7, and I think back to when I'm 7 years old, we at that age we're super sensitive to things, and we don't have a comeback. You can't have a comeback to an adult. It's like, what do you say? But at the same time, we are so crushed by what they say, and you just never forget how that person made you feel in that moment. So I can't imagine what you felt like at 7. And then like Shateek did mention, like, you know, Dimitri, he was like, I'm supposed to call her auntie, because it was confusing.
It was very confusing. Because I had the same questions, because first of all, you're bigger than me,
right?
Already, so I'm
confused.
I don't understand, and nobody explained. And I think that's also what it was. It was just kind of like, oh, you're gonna meet them. Oh, like this is our meetup. So
there was no real prep for it.
Well, whose son is this? Whose daughter? What do they look like? Because I'm like, I'm extra confused now, because I just didn't understand. And like I said, it was no explanation at all. It was just like we got thrown into it. And I can't really say we. I feel like I got thrown into it, being like the youngest. And again, I was blinded to all of this. So it was different. It was really different.
So with that first interaction, did you see them after that? What was your relationship like with them during that time?
It wasn't anything after that. I know I didn't like the way I felt. And yeah, it just wasn't, to my knowledge, like it was a lot of like back and forth about it. I guess, I don't know. Like, I'll be honest, my mom kind of kept me out of that. So I don't know, but it was just kind of like, you know, she's not like, it's cool. Like, we don't have to force her on anybody. And yeah, like, we kind of left it alone from there.
So that first interaction, you already let your mother know, like, nope, no more. I don't want to go over there. You spoke to your dad and said, no, thank you. So when did you meet Shateek? Because I asked her, and she was like, you don't have to ask her, because I wanted to know, like, what was it, an embrace? And she said you guys met in person at your dad's funeral. She reached out to you via DM, and she said something like, she said, I'm your sister, but she didn't physically see you until the funeral. So what was that like?
We seen each other before the funeral, but it's crazy because I get why she wouldn't remember that, because I wouldn't remember that either. But
so when was that? When was that moment?
Because I lived in Delaware like for 2 years before, or like a year longer before my father passed away. So she came to Delaware to see me. But it was so often that, like, so let me go back. For me, from the first interaction, I think when she first wrote me, at first it was just like, at first I think I was a little upset, I'll be honest. Because it's just like, when I needed a sister to come write me, you ain't come write me. Now I'm grown. But then it was just like, I can't do that, right? Like, I can't live with malice in my heart. So, and I can't, not saying that it's a healing process, but I can't tell somebody when to heal. If it was the time for her, then it was the time for her. And like, I definitely, it was just kind of like, okay, cool. So I wrote her back and was like, okay, or something, when I got off work, and I called her. And it's crazy because I tell my mom everything, and I didn't tell my mom. And we was on the phone. We was on the phone for a minute. But it was like, it was weird. Like, that conversation was so strange, because even though we was talking to each other about, like, just a lot all at once. It was just kind of like, but yeah, girl, like I felt like I was talking to my sister, if that makes sense. And I've never felt that, and that's why I was kind of like, all right, this is a little creepy. I don't know. I guess like.
So you got a different vibe from Shateek than you did your other sibling.
Yes, yes.
So even though you were still like a little apprehensive about the connection at the moment, it's like, girl, you was not here when I needed you to tell me about boys or whatever it is that you were looking for from an older sister. She seems a lot open to having that relationship with you. So her openness, did it make you feel like, okay, I want to get to know more about them, or were you still reserved?
I mean, so I don't like, I can't even explain how it happened because it just happened so naturally. It's crazy because before all of this, Davier, one of my nieces, she went to school in Delaware, and my father had went to my grandparents' house one day, and they were telling him like, Arielle moved to Delaware. She doesn't live here anymore. She hasn't lived here in years. And he was like, oh, that's so crazy. She has a niece that like is in Delaware too. He wrote down Davier's number or whatever. And my grandma gave it to me, and she was like, oh, look, like your dad was here, and I'm like, okay. And something happened when somebody posted Davier, because we're around the same age and we know some of the same like friend groups. So somebody posted something, and I'm looking, and I always remember the name Davier because I've never heard that name before.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's her. And I'm looking at the picture. I'm like, I've seen this person before. I don't know who face I've seen it on. I don't know, but I've seen this person before. So one day I did write Xavier, and this has to be like maybe like 2 years before I even talked to Shateek. Maybe like a year or two before I talked to Shateek. And I had wrote Davier, and we just kind of had each other on Instagram. It wasn't anything crazy.
Did you see her in person? Did you meet up with her?
No. Okay. No. It was
just timing.
Like, just I feel like when the first time they came to my house, I think Davier was with Shateek. When I lived in Delaware. I think yes, it was Davier, Shateek, and Zoe, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But it was regular. It was like, oh hey.
So you felt like there was a connection already there, and it was just like we jumped in and we family, and that's it? Or was it just like, woo, calm down a little bit, I need to slow down before we get that close?
For me, what it was from the beginning, from that first phone call when I spoke to Shateek, she sounded like me, or I sound like her. And again, something that I dealt with in my other family that no one would ever know is I'm not like you guys. Like, as much as we want to say, like, you know, it's something very different about me. Why? Because, you know, but it was like I was always so different. So to speak to somebody, to hear somebody talk, and just everything, like, it was like, all right.
It's in the genes.
Okay. And it's crazy because, like, I used to like to fight. Like, fighting was the answer for me. And Shateek said something the first time, like, and she was like, yeah. She said something. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, yeah, because I'm the only one in my other family that responds in that way to something.
Physical.
So it's like, okay, it's making sense now. And yeah, that was kind of it.
So Shateek, your sister said she liked to fight, so you must have liked to fight too. So knowing you have your niece, and two nieces, your nephew, and a sister that sound like you, and you said you met her before. So when did you develop a stronger relationship or a closer bond with her? Because that time you said she saw you, but you don't think she remembers that. But now at your age, which is, she will say that if she wants to.
I'm 28.
At 28, what is your relationship now like with your siblings?
So for me and Shateek, like I said, I don't think that she remembers it because it's like, damn, like, oh my God.
Because she remembers it at the funeral.
And I'm telling you, we were like with each other years, like maybe like a year or two before,
His
because I
passing.
remember when my father passed, when she called me, we